For the rest of the day, Heathsby tried half-heartedly to attend to business, but his worries over money preyed on his mind, and besides, he was fast running short of the ingredients required to produce his goods. As the hunger gnawed in his belly, and the afternoon lapsed into a cold, hungry evening, he felt a heavy sense of injustice, angry both at his miserable situation and at himself for failing to overcome it. If only the baker could have paid his dues, instead of frittering away his cash on drink. Heathsby shook his fist. Bugger Budgeworth! Didn't he realise the penury to which his selfish behaviour was plunging the put-upon miller? After all the years I've lived in this village, hissed Heathsby beneath his breath, you'd think the name of Heathsby would count for summat, but instead the blighter sees me go wanting while he pours my money down his throat. What's the world coming to? Heathsby asked himself, pacing slowly up and down his hut, for want of anything better to do with himself this lonely evening. What's the world coming to? At the market the next morning, he shuffled awkwardly among the stalls, unable to afford the merest scrap, but keen not to advertise his poverty, lest his competitors should find some way of twisting it to their advantage. Instead, Heathsby fingered sacks of grain, peered at sheaths of corn, fingering the few coins in his pocket as if in preparation for purchase. Eventually, he decided to try and further the deception by engaging a stall-holder with the pretence of intended custom. He had known the man for many years, and was accustomed to his business-like ways. If there was one stall-holder who could be easily engaged by queries about stock, it was the penny-pinching Grimbury. "How much for these?" he asked, holding up a pair of cucumbers. But Grimbury looked half asleep, sprawled on top of a hay bale, and had to rouse himself to reply. What do you want?" he muttered, struggling to focus. "These cucumbers. I'm wondering how much." "Hey, put 'em down, put 'em down." "But I'm just asking how much." "I said put the ruddy things down," cried the costermonger, banging a fist down on his stall. "They cost a lot of brass, them things. I don't want your muddy hands getting 'em dirty. If you want 'em, you can flaming well pay for 'em." "I'm trying to pay for—" "They cost a lot of brass." At this, the stall-holder seemed to tumble upwards from his chair, and had to steady himself by reaching out for a pile of potatoes. Heathsby slapped the cucumbers down and flung up his arms in frustration. "You'll be getting them potatoes a lot dirtier. Look at your hands, they're filthy. They're my ruddy spuds." And again he almost dropped, eyes seeming to roll about and fingers trembling. The source of this instability was growing clear to Heathsby, who watched him through unsympathetic eyes. "Surely you haven't been drinking?" he asked, "at this hour of the day?" Behind the grocer he discerned a half-empty bottle stuffed into a sack of carrots. "You have! You have!" Heathsby took a step back, as if afraid the grocer's very presence was contagious, and shook his head like a disappointed schoolmaster. "You're just like that boozy baker. No wonder you can hardly stand up. It's disgraceful, man, at this time of day. Ah, bugger off, you bloody blackguard." But as he spat these words, the drunken vegetable vendor once more lost his balance and ended up slumped amid a mound of fruit and vegetables, waving a fist at Heathsby and cursing as he walked away. Heathsby fumed inwardly. As he marched through the market, he had to sidestep numerous men whose stumbling paths coincided with his own. "Bother you! Bother the lot of you!" cried Heathsby, no longer even sure where he was heading, just pacing down the flags to escape this monstrous market, where every face that swung into view displayed the unmistakable symptoms of intoxication. where each man seemed to be glugging from a jug or bottle, where almost all suggestion of respectable and honest commerce had been traded in for a picture of moral turpitude. Stalls were scruffy and unkempt, their goods no longer neatly arranged, but shoved on top of each other or piled messily by drunken hands. Empty baskets and discarded crusts lay on the ground, pecked at by birds. One man was even stood urinating against a fence. Heathsby remembered when this market had been the pride of the village, a fine epicentre of local produce, staffed by diligent merchants keen to sell their wares, and full of good-humoured badinage. But in recent times it had become a shadow of its former self, and today looked the very definition of disarray. Even as he reached the market gates, whose once pristine structure was now defaced by scuffs and worn away through the brute pushing of rough hands, he noticed a gang of urchins tottering by the green, drunken and unsteady, one of them pausing to vomit in the well. "Disgraceful," tutted Heathsby with a shake of the head. When he looked up, he saw the ungainly frame of a middle-aged man, his tunic all askew, supposedly employed by the authorities as some sort of inspector, whose job it was to keep order on the market. Good morning, Mr. Sprue. I say, ain't it a damnable state of affairs in here? This market is turning into a kind of Sodom and Gomorrah. It seems it's the demon drink that's most to blame. Aye, there's drunkards aplenty these days, Heathsby," sighed Sprue in resigned agreement. He stopped to prop his arms against the gate and surveyed the market-place through jaundiced eyes. "I've told the city fathers, but do they want to know? As I keep saying to missus, it'll be the ruin of this village we'll drink. The ruddy ruin. Well, what's to be done about it? That's the question, Heathsby. That's the question." And the inspector blew into the morning air, gazing out towards the hills. "Well, what's the answer?" demanded Heathsby. "I wish I knew, sire. I wish I knew. And it isn't even as if it's just the young uns. They're bad enough. But now the older folk are at it too. They're all going in for drinking these days, Heathsby. God knows when it's going to stop. But you're in charge of the market. You should be trying to prevent. I know, terrible, isn't it? I'm in charge, yet there's not a man among 'em who'll take a blind bit of notice of what I say. It ain't like in our day, is it, Heathsby? You used to have some respect for your elders back then, and folk had a bit of common decency. But now, it's a poor do now, it is, a poor do. I say, it's enough to turn anyone to drink." And at this, the disconsolate man slid a bottle from his sleeve, unplucking its top and tipping its contents down his throat without inhibition. Heathsby was incredulous. "Not you and all." "Aye, I know," conceded Sprue. "I'm spending all me brass on booze. The missus reckons we've barely got enough for bread now. But what am I to do? I'm so bleeding depressed by all this drinking that I've fallen prey to it myself." And without a shred of shame, he downed another shot. "I don't believe this," despaired Heathsby. "You're as bad as them. What's the world coming to, eh?" As he pounded down the streets, a rage took hold of him. He clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, felt ready to strike out at any man who crossed his path. Clambering in, he swiped aside some pots and pans, cluttering his kitchen, kicking a cauliflower against the larder. How angry he felt! This blasted boozing was ruining the village and making his own life intolerable. For the rest of the evening Heathsby slumped in a chair, staring into space, or shaking his head and turning his mind over and over the terrible scenes that he had witnessed. Come to think of it, this gin trouble appeared to explain a number of recent anomalies. Why so many of the local shops seemed to be opening and closing more irregularly. Why reports of violence were on the rise. Why the only man who seemed to consistently wear a smile on his face right now was the publican, whose inn appeared to be doing a thriving trade. Aye, it's drinking what seems to be the matter. He rose and stood by his window, casting a forlorn gaze across the rain-sodden marsh. And from what I can see, it's getting worse.